Welcome to the Adult Children Voices Across America Speakers Meeting Podcast. You may attend this meeting live on Thursdays at 6 p.m. Pacific Time using the Zoom ID 848-520-80640, password 061120. For more information about adult children of alcoholics and dysfunctional families, visit adultchildren.org.
The following speaker share from Ken F. was recorded on May 29th, 2025.
So hello, everybody. I'm Ken, coming to you from Los Angeles, California. It is a pleasure to be here. Going to talk a little bit about my childhood, not too much. Basically, I grew up very secluded. I had kind of helicopter parents. My father was extremely overprotective. My mother said that she didn't have any children after me because she just couldn't take how protective my father was over me when I was a child. When I was like 4 years old, my dad was tickling me one day and he wouldn't stop. I told him I hated him and he pulled back at that moment. And I never realized it until many years later when I was an adult. And I asked him, how come you were so distant and just not present? And he said, well, you told me you hated me and I was done with you at that point. So that kind of paints a little bit of a picture of, kind of the beginning of my childhood. I was very awkward. Wasn't really raised around a lot of other kids. There were neighborhood kids that I would hang out with, but I was very awkward socially because up until the time I was like in kindergarten, I really wasn't around other kids other than my sister and the friends that she had over. So my influence basically were my sister, and my sister was playing with Barbie dolls. I'd want to play with Barbie dolls. I learned a lot of stuff from my sister because that's the world that I knew. And my parents were the type of people that didn't want me, I should say my mother specifically, was the type of person who didn't want me to get my play clothes dirty. So she didn't want me to play outside because I'd get my play clothes dirty. I had a very lonely childhood. I listened to a lot of music with my headphones. I would sit in a rocking chair and just stare at the stereo and just kind of go off into my own head because that's all the options that I had. So I had a very lonely childhood. And when I was about 13 years old and I had started going to a church with a neighbor girl, they were doing a high school college bicycle trip that was 5 days long. And my bicycle kind of became my ticket out of the house. I felt like my higher power gave me my bicycle as a means to cope and survive. And I begged to go on this trip, and they saw this really scrawny, and I'm going to show you a picture in a minute, but a really scrawny kid, and said, this is a kid for the high school college kids. These are for like young adults. You can't keep up with them. And I begged them to let me go. And I said, please let me go. Please let me go. I will prove to you I can ride as fast as the big kids. And they let me go, and it was life-changing. It was a 5-day bike trip down the California coast. I felt very awkward with being around the bigger kids, but when I was by myself, I felt this sense of freedom. And I'm bringing this part of my story up because a lot of my growth happened because of my bicycle. I'm going to skip ahead to the ACA growth in a few minutes. I like that I'm talking right now because I am about a week away from the 40th anniversary when I packed up my bicycle and I rolled out of my parents' driveway in Cypress, California, and I did not stop until I got to Boston, Massachusetts. So this is a picture of me, kind of awkward looking. I think I weighed like 132 pounds back then. I was the same height that I am now. I was just moments away from rolling out. You can kind of see my bike behind me. I had my tent, my sleeping bag, my stove. I had everything that I would need to carry. And I was also leaving with 2 companions. So there was a lot of teamwork that I was trying to instill. But this is me with my bike and my skid lid. And this is just how I rolled back then. And the helmet didn't stay on my head most of the way. The helmet, for the first year or so was used to protect my loaf of bread from getting smashed on the back of my bicycle. Down the line, a year later, I accidentally left my helmet behind in a polygamous colony when I spent the night in a polygamous colony, and we kind of rolled out rather quickly in the morning. So I left my helmet there then. Anyway, just kind of talk a little bit about who I was in that moment before I rolled out of my parents' driveway. I really didn't have a lot of self-esteem. I had changed my major in college. I really wanted to be an actor from the time I could remember. I did a lot of community theater, like when I was in junior high school, and in college. But I started to get really disillusioned because I would show up to an audition and there'd be 150 guys that looked just like me. I wanted something more stable. That's one thing I knew. I wanted something more stable, but it was my dream. So when I let go of my dream, I didn't really know what was next. I had no idea what I was going to do. And I had done some short rides, but in 1 week's time, I had 3 different people ask me to go on these grand epic journeys. And the third person said, "Hey, let's go to Chicago." And I just said, heck, if we're going to go to Chicago, we're going to go all the way to Nova Scotia. I didn't even know where Nova Scotia was. I just knew it sounded good. Now we were going to get to Nova Scotia. So I was scared, didn't have much self-esteem. I was still living at home with my parents, kind of failure to launch. I think my mother kept me dependent because she didn't want to be left alone with my father when I was out of the house. So she kind of orchestrated me to kind of need to stay home for many years. So I didn't really know if I was going to be able to survive. I had my friends with me, and I think that was an important thing in the beginning, was to know that I wasn't doing this alone. I kept a journal. And the first year I read the journal afterwards, and I didn't really say very much. I can tell you the days I did laundry, and I can tell you how much a Big Mac cost in 1985. But I really didn't really go much into feelings and thoughts and everything. And I really realized that I missed out on that. So on future trips, I made sure that I kept a much more detailed diary. When I finished the trips and went back to college, because I did two, I did 1985, and then I had such an amazing trip that I did another one in 1986. When I was in college, I felt there was a story to be told, and I put that in book form. And I didn't know anything about publishing books, so it sat on my computer for many, many, many years until COVID hit. And then with COVID, it's like, okay, why don't I take this out and dust this off and re-edit this and then see if I can publish this online. And I had been in program for a few years at that time. So when I was able to dust it off, I was able to really see all my laundry list traits that were just coming up on this trip and just like bleeding me to death. Uh, the fear of authority figures. I had a really hard time asking for help. I had a hard time because I was so afraid if I asked somebody, like if I stopped at a church and knocked on the door, if I was knocking at a farmhouse door asking if I could pitch my tent somewhere in the field, I was just so afraid that these people would come out with shotguns. I mean, these are just all totally unrealistic fears, but these are the fears that I was brought up with, and just the high sense of rejection. So it's really amazing in hindsight, looking back to how all these things were functioning, but they were my normal. So I never really questioned them. And looking back, I did finally publish the book, and I was able to edit it with the ACA overtones in there, which were so prevalent, because I really think that so much of my growth was from identifying a lot of my inner child insecurities and learning to overcome them. Being in the middle of nowhere, no campgrounds, nothing, and knocking on a farmhouse door and just asking, is it okay if I pitch my tent somewhere at the edge of your field and just have access to your water? And after kind of scratching their heads, the farmers or the farmers' wives would look at me and they'd say, "Well, you can do that, but we have a guest bedroom and we're sitting down to eat dinner in a few minutes. So why don't you come inside and wash up, join us for dinner, and you can have a bed tonight." And I just felt so unworthy. I couldn't understand why somebody would want to help me out. And I remember taking a shower one day and just watching the dirt come off my body and go down the drain, and just thinking, I better clean the shower up because I have to leave it the way I found it. I don't want these people to think, horrible things about me and bicyclists. And then I remembered that, maybe they knew that when they saw me. Maybe they saw how dirty I was, and that they wouldn't have asked me in if they didn't see something in me. And I had to realize that maybe other people were seeing things in me that I didn't see in myself. one thing was a lot of people would say to me, oh, great that you're riding your bike cross country because I can't even ride my bike around the block. And I would look at these people and they looked like they were in much, much better shape than me because I was just so scrawny. And I started out with at 132 pounds and I got down at one point to 123. So I was eating every 2 hours, but the way my metabolism was, I just couldn't keep the weight on. And I was really afraid that I was going to get sick because the weight just would not stick on me. And that was another thing too. People would invite me in and they'd feed me, and I couldn't stop eating. And I would like feel so embarrassed that I was like eating them out of everything that they had cooked. But I realized at some point these people really found joy in helping out. And the people that would say, I can't even ride my bike around the block, I would think, well, if I can do this, anybody can. What I didn't realize was what they were saying wasn't, if I trained and I got, the time underneath me and the miles, that I still couldn't do this. That's not what they were saying. What they were saying was, I don't have the determination to set out to complete a goal like this. It took me so long to absorb it that way and to accept the compliment when they said that to me. And I see that in so many ways that so many of us have our own determination to do our own things that we're gifted to do. And what we might take for granted, other people really look up to and admire. I have friends that I think are amazing parents, but because they struggle, they minimize the hard work that they do. People I know that have college degrees that excel at their careers don't give themselves credit for their specialties and their gifts that they have. I think these are all part of the laundry list traits that we're brought up with in that, not being able to believe in ourselves because everyone else around us must be smarter than us, everyone else around us must be more lovable than us, and everybody around us just must be healthier than us. And that's one of the promises, and I think it's one of the for the Bill of Rights. I think the older Bill of Rights says you can be healthier than those people around you. And I really do think that's true. It took me so long to figure that out because I always figured that if other people said something or contradicted me, that they were always right. They knew more than I did. I was brought up to respect your elders, So it took me a while to realize that that's not always necessarily true, and to humble myself and promptly admit when I am wrong, but also realize that maybe I have grown and maybe I'm healthier than I give myself credit to. It was really important for me to get out of the house and do these trips. I was 23 when I set off on my first cross-country trip, and I really wanted to explore the world. I knew it wasn't exactly the world that my parents painted for me. When I was a child, my parents would leave me with my grandmother and go on vacation because my father would say, it's not a vacation if there's children. And my parents would send me postcards from all the national parks they went to. So when I plotted this trip, I plotted to go to all these national parks that I yearned to see because I only got postcards from. And I brought my camera, and afterwards, everybody would tell me that my pictures looked just like postcards. And I'd have to tell them, well, that's because that's what I grew up looking at were postcards. But it was so important for me to have a sense of teamwork. I grew up watching, TV shows like Brady Bunch and Partridge Family, and everybody had best friends. Everybody had, a family that supported them. And that's the illusion that I wanted to have. So when I left for cross country with my two friends, I thought that we were going to be a team and go all the way cross country together. So much that I carried half of the tent. A friend of mine carried the other half of the tent, and then the third friend carried our stove. So we kind of had teamwork. But my friends were dealing with their own burdens and their own insecurities. And one of my friends wasn't eating enough on the trip. She just didn't see a reason to eat if she wasn't hungry, even though she was blowing off thousands of calories a day and flew home with exhaustion-induced asthma. So when she left, I had to carry more weight. And when my friend that talked me into doing the trip got to Chicago, where he was from, and he was home, he said, I have been miserable every single day, and you're going off on your own. And everybody tried to talk me into stopping. They stopped, they were smart, come home, go back to college, do the things that you need to do. And I hated that lack of support that I had. And I was scared about being by myself. Early on, right before the first friend flew home, we had kind of had a rift that morning, and it was going to be hot. And I wanted to get where we were going before it got to be about 106 degrees. They wanted to go back to a coffee shop. I didn't realize that she was sick. I had been staying within inches of them for the first 3 weeks of the trip because one of my friends had a tool. And if for some reason I had had a broken spoke, I would know how to fix it because I didn't have that tool. And I needed to be near my friend. Otherwise, I was panicking. And I realized I need to get that tool. I need to get that tool myself so I don't have to feel dependent on other people and that I can take care of myself no matter what situation I'm in. And that's exactly what I did that day. I went out and at the first bike store, I bought that tool and I was very self-sufficient. And I did the trip from Chicago all the way to Boston. And no, I did not make it to Nova Scotia on that trip. By the time I got to Montreal, it was starting to get very cold and chilly. The days were shorter. It was raining. And I thought, you know what? If I cut 2 weeks out of my trip and I go back to work and start working, then maybe next summer I can do the same thing again. And I did. I did a second cross-country trip. And once again, the experiences that I had on the trip, the experiences that my higher power led me into were just amazing. I want to talk a little bit about, a couple laundry list traits, in particular, laundry list trait number 5, we live life from the viewpoint of victims. That was really a big theme of mine growing up. Why do I have such an asshole father? Why do I have to have braces on for 3 years when everyone else gets them off after a year? Why is it everybody else can go out in the neighborhood and play and I have to stay home? I always felt kind of like the victim. And when my friends on the trip stopped riding, it had nothing to do with me. I realized that. But I felt once again kind of victimized, like, why do I have to pick such a weird sport that nobody else wants to do this with me? Why can't I be like a normal person and just join a baseball league or a bowling league? Why do I have to go cross country bicycling where not a lot of people do that? So I was really stuck in the why me victim role for a long time. And I think with healing and with program, I was able to look back and look at who I am today. And I'm very happy with who I am today. I never thought that I would have a nice house like I have. I never thought that I would have the family that I have, the friends that I have, the career that I have, balancing everything. I've never thought that I would have that. And I'm actually, I don't know if you can see it or not, but I'm actually wearing a shirt from back then. The bicycle, the RV of the 1980s. I never thought that I would weigh over 150 pounds. So I actually still fit this shirt. I actually fit it a little bit better today than I fit it back then. But I realize now that I had to go through all those why me's. Why did this happen to me? Because all those things helped to form me. And I look back and I realize I needed to go through that adversity to become the strong, healthy, mature person that I am today. That's kind of how I work through laundry list trait number 5. Laundry list trait number 6, we have an overdeveloped sense of responsibility. And I realized on the bike trip that I was worried about my trip. I wanted to make sure that I finished the trip. But that also meant that I was so worried about my friends. One friend was an overeater and she really wasn't in shape to do the trip and ended up hitchhiking every day. Another friend had a history of anorexia that she hadn't been completely over yet and had a problem with finishing her trip because of that. Another friend was a chronic complainer. I mean, all these different things that they were dealing with, but I had to take care of them. I had to make sure they were safe. I had to make sure they got from point A to point B. And it was interesting because each time one of my friends stopped riding with me, I immediately went through a big depression that lasted about 2-3 days because ding, 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 abandonment, right? I have a friend riding beside me, camping out with me, going to restaurants with me, doing all these things one minute, and then the next minute, they're gone. And the silence to me was extremely deafening. And I realized when one of the last friends turned back and flew home that by worrying so much about her, I wasn't looking into myself and what was going on with me. I wasn't taking care of myself. And I think that was a huge lesson for me to learn on that trip, that it's okay to take care of other people. It's okay to be concerned about other people. It's okay to be responsible, but not at the cost where you don't look into yourself as well. I have to say, every time somebody left on the trip, I went through a depression. And it wasn't until 1994 when I went cross country for the third time and I had a friend with me, and my friend only lasted a week. And the day that he turned around and flew home, I kept waiting for the depression to hit, and it didn't. And it made me realize that I had grown, I had taken care of myself, and I could feel sad for him and I could feel the loss of the companionship, but I didn't have to feel depressed. I didn't have to have it take me out because I learned basically to be my own loving parent in respect for that. So, like I said, I'm really happy with where I am today in my life. I still cycle. I'm planning to leave in 2 weeks to ride across the Midwest. I'm going to be riding from Omaha to St. Louis. So, if anybody in this room lives along the way and wants to say hello, just let me know. It'd be fun to meet for coffee or lunch or something. I have met other fellow travelers on other trips, so it wouldn't be the first time that happened. And I'm trying to restructure myself right now because I'm just getting over being on strike with my job for 6.5 months. And that was a huge shift in structure, a huge shift in security. We thought that we would be on strike for no more than 2.5 months. That's really what we were all projecting for. And some of my colleagues went back to work after a week or two, which made me feel a little bit of abandonment because, hey, why am I out here fighting the fight when you're not doing it? But kind of the opposite thing happened at the same time. When I was marching on the picket line, I got to meet all these other people that worked in other departments that I would have never met. And we became really close. And every day started with a hug, every day ended with hugs. There was just something special about the camaraderie. And there were times afterwards on Fridays, we would all go out together for like a happy hour. I took some people kayaking one day after the picket line. I just told a whole bunch of people, come on over and let's have lunch at my place. Uh, and I really think that I got through that type of adversity well because of the fellowship. Uh, Prior to coming to ACA, I had done a lot of therapy, I'd done a lot of work on myself, but I really think that ACA helped polish off the rough edges. So, yeah, I felt a little upset with my colleagues for going back to work, but I worked on acceptance. I realized that I'm not in control of people, places, things, and situations. I realized, like with the serenity prayer, that, I have to accept that I can't change other people. And if they want to go back to work and if they want to complain about the strike, even though they're not on strike, that's on them. I have solidarity with the friends and I can choose to be around positivity. And today I can choose to be around people who lift me up and don't need to be around toxic people who pull me down. That's a real clear boundary that I have with that. I always say the three most important rules of recovery are structure, structure, and structure. And I made sure that I still maintained structure by not going to work, even though my structure changed. I didn't plan on being on the picket line more than once a week. I didn't realize that I was going to immediately be hit with a financial drain when I had to put a new roof on my house, because that was a huge multi-thousand-dollar hit to my finances. But I got over that within 2 weeks. I think that was something that I was able to bounce back from. I was able to realize that I had other income streams coming through and that I was going to get through this okay, and that I could be out for the long run. And that's exactly what I did. Now that I'm back at work, I'm adapting back to my old normal. And I'm also getting ready to go away, like I said, on a trip in 2 weeks. So I'm really working My program, I feel like instead of doing the steps right now, I'm actually living the steps. I think the best way for me to learn is to internalize everything instead of just me writing the steps and working with a sponsor afterwards to take it to the next level. I think it's so important to live the steps, to eat, breathe the steps. And I really feel with the people that I'm helping to go through the steps, that as I'm helping them go through the steps, it's like I'm also working the steps again, which is keeping them in my forefront and really trying to work a 10th step every day. I think that helps me to maintain a certain level of serenity. Not to say that my life doesn't have stressors, that there aren't some people in my life that will, drop little toxic bombs on me from time to time, but I have the means to cope with them without me, turning it into a catastrophe, without me needing to be addicted to excitement any longer, because that's just not something that I need in my life anymore. When people do call me and they're in crisis, I can separate them from me and let them have the crisis and give them time to support them. But when I start to feel like I'm being pulled into it, I set boundaries and I detach somewhat because that's healthy. And I really feel like I'm in a really good place today. I really love the people that are in my circles with the fellowship, and I love being a part of their growth because as they grow, and that's kind of where I am today. I do want to bring up something here just to be a little preachy for a few minutes because I know I'm one of the last speakers on the schedule for this group. And I want to go back to laundry list trait number 5 and laundry list trait number 6, because in the rooms that I've been into, in the ACA meetings that I've attended, I've seen a division of some people that are completely laundry list trait number 5 and some that are number 6. And the people that are number 5, they don't want to take a commitment. They don't want to open their mouths. They want to remain silent. They want to remain a fly on the wall, even if they've been coming into the meeting for many, many years. They feel like a victim, like life is happening to them. And if you remember, the solution says that healing begins when we risk moving out of isolation. So they never tap into their internal determination to get out of that victim role. The opposite that I see is number 6. We have an overdeveloped sense of responsibility. These are the people that come in that are like, okay, we need a secretary, I'll be the secretary. We need a treasurer, I'll be the treasurer. But then they hold on to these roles because nobody else wants them, and the meetings become very polarized. I am aware of a meeting here in the LA area where a lot of people complained that the people that were in leadership at the meeting were too controlling. And the people that were in leadership were complaining that no one else was stepping up to do the duties. And it was interesting to watch this metamorphosis happen because after several years, the leadership stepped back and said, we're leaving the meeting. We can't do this any longer. And the people that were like, oh, I can't do this, stepped up to the plate and they run a very successful meeting now. They needed to have the ability to step up and grow. And this is called the principles of rotation. Nobody should be stuck in any role for an extended period of time. The roles are all supposed to be shared. And I know from volunteering that I've grown with every role that I have taken. And it's important, and I don't want to be stuck in a role because I want to allow other people to have the same opportunities for growth that I have. So I'm just throwing that out to you that if you're somebody who really focuses on laundry list trait number 6 and you're so over responsible that you have to take care of everything for fear that without you, everything is going to fall apart, that you maybe step back and start taking care of yourself more and let everyone else start to take care of themselves too. And if you're somebody who's so fearful of doom and gloom, talk to the people in the leadership positions about your fears. Talk to your sponsor or fellow traveler about that. But don't stay in the fear. So remember, fear is an acronym, false evidence appearing real, fuck everything and run, or my favorite, which is face everything and recover. So if you do feel like you would someday like to have the courage to take a leadership position, please start moving towards that. I didn't just ride my bicycle cross country one day. I started by riding my bicycle to Knott's Berry Farm, which was 3 miles away. And then I started riding my bicycle to the beach, which was 10 miles away. I built up to it until someday when I was ready, it's like, hey, I can do this now. So definitely build up to it, but have the determination to get where you want to go. Have some vision of where you want to be. I think I was really lucky as a kid because while everybody else had imaginary playmates, my imaginary playmate was my version of myself coming from the future and sitting down with me and telling me, you will be okay someday. I'm lucky enough that I had that. And I guess in some way that was me subconsciously tapping into my own loving parent at that age. And I really feel like now when fear creeps in, I do ask myself what I'm afraid of. I was doing a bicycle ride. Actually, I was doing a kayaking trip outside of Las Vegas a couple months ago when I was on strike. And I decided, hey, I have the time. Why don't I just ride my bicycle to Vegas? And 2 days before, I was lying in bed and I was feeling the fear and I was feeling depressed. And I asked myself what I was afraid of. And it's like, nothing, because you've done it before. You've ridden to Vegas before. It's like, what do you have to be afraid of? And I also gave myself permission. If you don't want to go, don't go. You don't have to get on your bike and ride to Vegas. You can drive to Vegas next week. That's fine. But I also know me and know that if I didn't go, it's a major regret that I would hold against myself because I know me and I didn't have opportunities as a child. So when I have opportunities now, I grab them, each and every one. And this was an opportunity and I grabbed it. And I'm so, so grateful that I did. So think about that as opportunities for leadership come up in this meeting. If the opportunity is there to reach out and grab it, and if there's any fears, to face the fears and be gentle with yourself, and just step up to the plate and do it. I know that I'm grooming some people right now that as soon as they get through the steps, I hope that they will be speakers in here because I'm very proud of them and everything that they've accomplished so far. I continue to be a part of this meeting and hope to come back again someday. For a topic, and looking at my time right now, I think it's okay to wrap up and we have more time for sharing. My topic is determination to grow. Do you have determination to grow? Do you lack determination to grow? But I think that's so important to give ourselves opportunity and to grab those opportunities and really tap into your determination because as I tell everybody, it's my determination that gets me down the road and not my bicycle. So I'm Ken, and thank you for letting me be of service.